The moment truth arrives, it doesn't arrive softly. It crashes in. It shatters denial so completely that the entire version of reality they built starts to flicker. That is exactly what just happened to the people who believed you were unaware. They finally understand you were never in the dark. Not for a second. You saw everything as it unfolded. And that realization is not just uncomfortable for them, it is corrosive. It eats away at the image they tried to maintain. Imagine someone living inside a house made entirely of lies, convinced it is solid, until one day the lights turn on. Every crack becomes visible, every weak point is exposed, every illusion collapses under simple visibility, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. That is what your presence did. Not through force, not through confrontation, but simply by existing with awareness. You revealed what they tried to keep hidden, without ever having to say a word. The universe has a strange but consistent way of balancing things. Those who rely on illusion eventually forget one simple truth. Reality does not negotiate. It reveals. And when it does, everything unstable breaks under its own weight. They underestimated you as if you were just another character in their limited story. But now they are realizing something unsettling. You were never inside their story at all. You were reading it from the outside the entire time. Here is the part that would make anyone uncomfortable if they were in their position. People who deceive others always assume their target is blind to the game. That assumption alone is their first mistake. Because the moment they realize you noticed everything, the tone shifts, the patterns, the inconsistencies, that is when the internal collapse begins. Their mind replays every interaction with one looping question: how did we not see this? It is a type of humiliation that does not stay on the surface. It sinks deeper, straight into the ego, where it lingers. And meanwhile, you were never confused. You were never lost in their narrative. You were simply aware. And now they stand there, stripped of certainty, realizing they were never the ones in control of the story they thought they were writing. You were observing quietly, patiently, letting them think they were getting away with something. And now the truth is hitting them so hard, their pride is filing for early retirement. Think about it. They really believed you didn't see through the manipulation, the fake praise, the backhanded comments, the secret conversations, the weird energy. Meanwhile, you were clocking every action like a human lie detector. They performed, you observed. They pretended, you understood. They laughed, you waited. And waiting is something they never expected you to do. Now they're the ones pacing around with that sinking feeling in their stomach because they know you were onto them. They know you recognized the patterns. They know you felt the contradictions. They know you sensed the hidden motives. And the worst part for them, you didn't react the way they hoped. You didn't explode. You didn't fold. You didn't fall apart. You just kept moving like someone who already knew how the story ends. The universe has a funny sense of timing. It doesn't expose liars when they're ready. It exposes them when it's most humiliating. And right now, they're dealing with the shame of knowing you were 10 steps ahead. You weren't playing checkers with them. You were watching them attempt chess without understanding the rules. Every time they tried to embarrass you, they embarrassed themselves. Every time they tried to hide something, they revealed everything. Every time they tried to paint you as foolish, they painted a portrait of their own insecurity. That's the part they can't deal with. They're replaying conversations thinking, did they catch that? Yes, you did. Did they know what I was doing? Absolutely. Were they aware of my intentions? Completely. That's why they're uncomfortable now. Because the truth finally caught up, and you were already standing there waiting for it. The chosen ones always have this quiet way of knowing, not because they're trying to expose anyone, but because they can't help but see patterns. You saw their motives before they understood their own. You felt their shift before they knew they were shifting. You caught their tone before they realized they slipped. You noticed what they thought was invisible. That's the thing about people like you. You don't need proof to sense truth. And now the people who once felt bold enough to mock you can't even look at you. They're avoiding eye contact, conversations, even being in the same space. Their guilt is heavier than their pride can handle. Every time they see you, they get reminded of the moment they realized you weren't the fool they were. It's funny how they used to think they had control. They thought they could tilt the narrative, twist the story, manipulate your perception. But here's the twist they never saw coming. You were the only one operating from reality. They were performing. You were perceiving. They were bluffing. You were observing. They were lying. You were waiting for the truth to collect its bill. And now the bill is due. They finally understand that the one they underestimated is the one who watched every scene unfold. Their regret is loud, their embarrassment is louder, and their fear. It's the loudest of all, because now they have to face a version of you who isn't guessing, a version of you who knows. They finally realized you saw everything. You've known it the entire time, and now every mistake they made is spotlighted in front of them. They're feeling foolish because the truth exposed them completely. You didn't even have to lift a finger. You were already ahead. The universe did the rest. Chosen one, you didn't lose anything. They did. They lost the illusion of power. They lost the comfort of thinking they fooled you. They lost the mask they were hiding behind. And now they're stuck, living with the truth. You were right the whole time. And they were the ones stumbling around in their own lies. And that's exactly why they're terrified now. They finally know who you are, and they finally know you knew. And Chosen One, appreciate you for sticking with this message, because what comes next is where the real shockwave hits. If you're ready to walk through every layer of how they finally realized you knew the truth all along, then stay close. You don't want to miss a single piece of what's about to unfold. Drop a 777 in the comments if you're ready to step deeper into your power and watch their regret unfold in real time. And if you feel called to support the team behind this message with a super thanks, know that every bit of love fuels this mission and keeps the truth flowing. Whether it's a cent or a stack, it all strengthens the force we're building together. And now, let's move into it step by step. And trust me, if you are who I think you are, you'll feel the pull to stay till the very last word. Let's begin. Number 1. The cost of seeing through every lie they hid behind. Nothing humiliates a liar more than the moment they realize the quiet one saw the truth the entire time. That's the punch they're choking on right now. They finally understand you weren't confused. You weren't guessing, and you weren't wandering in the dark. You were watching. You were learning. You were seeing everything they tried to bury under fake smiles and weak excuses. And now that the truth has snapped back in their faces, they're scrambling for air, while you stand there knowing you called it from day one. It's wild how people expect you to dim your awareness just because it makes them uncomfortable. They want you to be blind so they can stay brave. They want you clueless so they can feel powerful. They want you naive so they can keep pretending their lies are working. But you weren't built like them. Your mind catches things they think are invisible. Your intuition reads things they never learned to translate. You walk into a room and pick up the truth before they even finish their performance, and that terrifies them. Ever wonder why the chosen ones always end up alone at certain stages of life? Because the universe gives vision before it gives supporters. You saw farther, so you walked differently. You noticed the cracks in people's intentions before anyone else did. While others were busy admiring masks, you were studying the shadows behind them. That kind of eyesight comes with a price. Isolation. Not because you're wrong, but because you're right too early. And the world hates anyone who's right too early. Your presence alone exposed what they were trying to hide. They felt seen in a way they weren't ready for. And insecure people don't handle being seen. They attack the spotlight instead of fixing what it reveals. When someone can't handle the truth about themselves, they call the truth-teller crazy. When someone feels threatened by your clarity, they pretend your vision is a flaw. And when someone realizes you're uncontrollable, they try to control the narrative about you instead. But the funny thing about the truth is that it doesn't stay buried just because someone throws dirt on it. It grows roots. It creates pressure. It cracks the ground open. And eventually it forces everyone to face what you saw long before them. That's the moment they're living in right now. The moment where every lie collapses and every excuse falls flat. The moment where the person they mocked suddenly becomes the person they study. They're replaying everything you said, every warning you gave, every sign you pointed out. They remember the way you tried to guide them. They remember the shift in your eyes when you saw something wasn't right. They remember the softness in your tone when you were trying to help them avoid consequences they're drowning in now. And all they can think is, how did they know? How did they see what we didn't? That question alone is dragging their pride across the floor. The truth doesn't need permission to expose people. It doesn't need them to be ready. It simply shows up, loud and final. And right now, it's hitting them like a wrecking ball they never saw coming. Their arrogance is scattered. Their confidence is cracked. Their ego is bleeding. And the worst part, they know it's their fault for ignoring the one person who actually saw what was coming. You. You were the quiet observer in a room full of actors. They assumed silence meant ignorance. They thought your kindness was weakness. They thought your patience was gullibility. They thought your distance meant you weren't paying attention. Meanwhile, you were 5 steps ahead, watching their every move reveal exactly who they were. You read the whole story before they even finished the introduction. Now they're dealing with the reality that you weren't the one who failed to see. They were. You tried to show them the cliff before they walked off it, but they laughed. They thought you were dramatic, overthinking, or imagining things. Now they're standing at the bottom of the same cliff, bruised and confused, finally realizing you weren't warning them to sound smart. You were warning them because you actually saw the danger. Here's what's eating them alive. It's not that you were right, it's that you were right quietly. You didn't boast. You didn't rub anything in their face. You didn't scream, "I told you so." That silence feels like the loudest judgment they've ever experienced. It's humiliating to realize the person they underestimated was the only one awake the whole time. Ever notice how people who once mocked you suddenly turn polite when the truth catches up? They start choosing their words carefully. They avoid eye contact. They over-explain. They treat you with a weird mix of fear and respect. They're not being nice, they're being exposed. And exposure makes people behave differently. They're embarrassed because your insight forced them to confront their own laziness, their own ignorance, their own denial. You saw what they refused to see, and now they're paying the price for pretending they were smarter than you. Their illusions shattered because they built them on air. Your truth stayed solid because you built it on awareness. And the twisted beauty of it all. You didn't have to do anything for this moment to arrive. You didn't have to argue, beg, prove, or fight. You simply had to exist as someone who sees what others avoid. The universe handled the rest. It always does. Right now, their regret is louder than their past confidence. Their guilt is heavier than their excuses. Their silence is thicker than their lies. They feel foolish because the truth revealed something brutal. You weren't the outsider. You were the only one who knew the map. And now they're forced to deal with the realization that the person they tried to dismiss is the same person they should have listened to. Their pride failed them. Your insight saved you. That's the separation point between someone chosen and someone ordinary. So if you're wondering why they act weird around you now, why they hesitate, why they stumble over their own words, it's because they finally understand who you are. You weren't the one wandering in confusion. You were the one navigating with clarity. You weren't the one trying to impress anyone. You were the one seeing the truth they were scared to acknowledge. They finally realized you knew everything the entire time. And now they feel foolish, exposed, and powerless in front of someone they underestimated. Let that fuel you, not break you. Let their shock remind you why you stand apart. Let their regret become the proof you never needed. Because the cost of seeing what others won't is heavy, but the reward is priceless. You walk in truth, and they now walk in the consequences of ignoring it. They thought you were alone because you were wrong. Turns out you were alone because you were right too soon. Number 2. The quiet storm they never saw coming. Silence is the sharpest blade. It cuts deepest when the enemy thinks you're unarmed. That's exactly why they're trembling now. They spent so long mistaking your quiet for weakness, your calm for confusion, your stillness for surrender. They couldn't imagine that your silence wasn't a retreat. It was strategy. It was the moment before the lightning hits. The part of the storm nobody respects until the sky splits open. And now they're realizing the whole time you were the storm forming right in front of them. Here's another truth they're choking on. The loudest person in the room rarely knows anything worth hearing. While they filled the world with noise, explanations, excuses, fake confidence and shaky performances, you didn't lift a finger. You didn't fight for their understanding. You didn't audition for their approval. You didn't try to compete with their chaos. You stood still. And that stillness exposed every insecurity they tried to hide behind volume. Imagine this. 2 people standing in a room. One is shouting directions, making a mess, waving their hands like they're in an emergency. The other stands quietly, observing everything, noticing each detail the loud one overlooks. When the truth finally reveals itself, guess who looks foolish? Guess who feels embarrassed? Guess who realizes the quiet person wasn't lost at all? Exactly. That's the mirror they're staring into. Another quote that fits them perfectly. Your silence wasn't the absence of power. It was the refusal to waste it. Because power that is real doesn't need to prove itself. Power doesn't scream. Power doesn't break its own dignity just to be heard. Power stands still, and the world eventually adjusts to it. Your silence made them confront their own noise, their own emptiness, their own lack of direction. You didn't need to expose them. They exposed themselves by reacting to the calm you held so effortlessly. And if you've ever wondered why your quiet made people uncomfortable, here's why. Noisy people rely on distraction to hide from themselves. When someone like you walks in, someone still, someone grounded, someone who can't be pulled into their chaos, they panic. They don't know how to act around someone who isn't trying to impress them. They don't know how to manipulate someone who doesn't need anything from them. They don't know how to intimidate someone who doesn't care about their noise. Imagine someone trying to start a storm in a glass of water while you're standing next to the ocean. Their ego can't process how small their drama looks through your eyes. That's why they mocked you. That's why they misjudged you. That's why they tried to provoke reactions you never gave them. Your silence forced them to hear the echoes of their own insecurities. And trust me, that sound ruins people faster than any argument ever could. Another way to understand this is through a chess game. One side moves loudly, aggressively, almost performatively. Every move is meant to be seen. The other side stays still, observant, calculating several steps ahead, without ever rushing the board. To an untrained observer, the loud player appears in control. But anyone who truly understands the game recognizes the quiet one as the real strategist. And when checkmate finally arrives, the loud player is always left asking the same question: how did this happen so fast? That is the exact reality they are facing now. You were the one they overlooked, the silent strategist they never bothered to understand. Silence is not absence, it is concentration. It is where awareness sharpens itself without distraction. While they were busy performing confidence, you were building inner clarity. While they were chasing approval, you were grounding yourself in truth. While they were trying to dominate attention, you were becoming something far more powerful. You were becoming undeniable. And now their noise means nothing, because reality has already overwritten every illusion they relied on. This is the part they never accounted for. Life does not reward volume, it rewards alignment. You never needed to raise your voice. You never needed to prove your position. You simply stayed true to what you saw, and everything else eventually collapsed under its own weight. Now their certainty is unstable. Their confidence is fractured. Their performance no longer holds, and for the first time, they are beginning to understand that your silence was never emptiness. It was strength they misread. And here are the questions that naturally arise in moments like this. Why did your silence unsettle them so much? Because deep down, they realized you were never deceived by their display. Even without speaking, your awareness exposed the gap between what they showed and what they were. People fear those who perceive clearly, and you perceive too clearly to be manipulated. Why did they dismiss your quiet presence at first, only to fear it now? Because they assumed noise was power. Now they are facing the consequence of underestimating someone who never needed noise at all. Why do they look at you differently now? Because the truth they mocked is the same truth haunting them. They know your silence wasn't confusion, it wasn't hesitation, it was strength. And now that their illusions have collapsed, they see that strength clearly. Too clearly. Imagine this scene. A ship lost at sea, waves crashing everywhere, chaos rising. But there's one lighthouse, steady, calm, silent. The ship ignores the lighthouse because it's too proud to admit it needs guidance. Then it crashes. Then it sinks. Then, in the middle of all that regret, it looks back at the lighthouse and realizes the silence was never weakness. It was direction. It was clarity. It was truth. You were that lighthouse. They ignored you. Now they're drowning in their own noise, while your stillness remains untouched. Another quote they deserve to hear. Some storms make noise, others make history. You were never the loud storm. You were the quiet one. The one that rewrites everything after it passes. The one that leaves people stunned, whispering, "How did we not see this coming?" They didn't see it coming because they were too busy hearing themselves. Your silence didn't just expose them, it humbled them. Every time they shouted, you remained calm. Every time they tried to provoke you, you stayed composed. Every time they waited for you to break, you didn't give them the satisfaction. That alone drove them crazy. Not because you were stubborn, but because you were centered, and centered people can't be manipulated. They finally understand the truth. The person who speaks the least often knows the most. And now the truth that lived quietly inside you is roaring louder than their ego can handle. Their arrogance has collapsed into regret. Their confidence has cracked into apologies they're too ashamed to say out loud. Their attitude has shrunk into silence, the same silence they once judged you for. Now the tables aren't just turned, they're flipped. You're the force in the room, and they feel it. You're the one with the answers, and they know it. You're the one they should have listened to. And that realization burns them every time they look your way. They finally understand your silence wasn't emptiness. It was awareness. It was wisdom. It was power they weren't prepared for. You were the quiet storm they laughed at until it slammed into their lives and exposed everything they wanted to stay hidden. And now they stand in the aftermath, embarrassed, humbled, and painfully aware of who you truly are. They never saw you coming, but the universe did. And now they have to face the consequences of underestimating the one person who didn't need noise to win. You were the quiet storm, and they were never ready. Number 3. The silence that made their confidence crash. Nothing scares a liar more than someone who refuses to react. That alone is why they're still rattled. They spent all that time performing, shouting, bragging, defending lies. And you stayed still. You didn't flinch. You didn't argue. You didn't fold. And that calm didn't just unsettle them. It shook their entire identity, because deep down they knew your silence wasn't emptiness. It was pressure. It was proof. It was power they couldn't imitate, no matter how loud they screamed. Imagine this, a small dog barking at a lion, thinking noise equals strength. That was them. They threw comments, jokes, shade, all hoping you'd break character and prove you were as insecure as they were. But your quiet didn't give them anything. That's when the fear kicked in, because when someone can't rattle you, they start to question themselves. And questioning themselves is the one thing they've avoided their whole life. Here's a fact they can't escape. Weak people make noise to feel strong. Strong people stay quiet because they don't need the noise. Your silence was a mirror they never wanted to look into. Every time you didn't react, they were forced to face the cracks in their confidence. Every time you stayed calm, their fake superiority shrank. Every time you didn't chase their approval, they realized they never had any power over you. And now their bravado has dissolved into embarrassment. Their certainty has turned into shaky glances. They finally see that the quiet one in the room wasn't confused. You were the only one who understood the whole situation from the start. You didn't bend, you didn't panic, you didn't lose control. You remained untouchable, exactly as you were meant to be. Silent, focused, unshaken. The storm they should have feared. Number 4. The curse of seeing the truth before anyone else. Being early with the truth feels less like wisdom and more like a punishment. That's the part nobody talks about. Everyone romanticizes the idea of seeing deeper, but they never mention the isolation that comes with it. When you saw the truth long before they were ready, you weren't celebrated. You were pushed to the edges, not because you were wrong, but because your clarity threatened the soft illusions they depended on just to function. Imagine watching a house slowly fill with smoke, while everyone inside insists it's just a vibe. You open the windows, warn them, point out the flames, and they look at you like you're dramatic. Not because they're confident, but because admitting you're right would force them to confront everything they don't want to face. Denial became their comfort. Your awareness became their enemy. Another truth. People don't hate the truth. They hate the person who delivers it too early. You tried to help. You tried to guide them. You tried to soften the impact. But their mocking wasn't real superiority. It was fear wearing a mask. Eventually, you stopped explaining, because explaining to the unwilling feels like screaming into water. So, you carried the weight alone, watching them walk toward disasters you predicted years before. Now the universe has flipped the script. Their illusions have exploded, and they're stumbling through the rubble. Panicked, confused, replaying every warning you gave. They finally feel the weight you carried, the one they dismissed, like it was nothing. And here's the twisted part. Being right still doesn't feel like winning. It feels heavy. It feels isolating. It feels like the burden they never helped you hold. But now they know. And that knowing burns. Number 5. They moved pieces. You command the whole board. Small minds chase moves. Sharp minds command outcomes. That one line sums up the entire collapse happening on their side of the board right now. They really believed their tiny, frantic moves meant domination. They thought every petty jab, every impulsive decision, every short-term win meant they were outsmarting you. Meanwhile, you weren't even playing their game. You were studying the map, not the moment. Imagine two players, one slamming checkers pieces like they're conquering nations, the other quietly setting up a chessboard they can't even comprehend. That was you. They were playing a child's game, celebrating leaps, acting impressed with themselves, while you were calculating trajectories, consequences, patterns, motives. They thought patience meant hesitation. They thought analysis meant weakness. They thought silence meant confusion. They had no clue. Patience is the weapon of someone who already sees the ending. Here's a brutal truth. When someone celebrates too early, it's because they don't know how long the game actually is. They were chasing dopamine hits. You were securing inevitabilities. They grabbed crumbs, calling them victories, while you turned entire strategies into leverage. And now, every single move they made for attention, control, or ego has boxed them in. Not because you trapped them, but because shallow thinking always traps itself. Imagine someone proudly climbing a ladder, only to realize it's leaning against the wrong building. That's them. They scrambled upward thinking they were gaining power. But they never checked the direction, never checked the foundation, never checked the truth. Then they looked across, and there you were. Not on a ladder, but on a mountain. A mountain they didn't even know existed. Another metaphor for their downfall. Picture someone sprinting in a maze, confident they're winning because they're fast. But they don't notice you're above the maze, with the entire layout in your hands. They weren't competing with you. They were competing with their own blindness. Their questions now are the funniest part. How did they see this coming? How did they stay so calm? Why didn't our move shake them? Easy answer. Because when you understand patterns, you understand outcomes. And when you understand outcomes, you don't panic over noise. Their downfall isn't your victory dance. It's their own blueprint unraveling. Every sloppy decision, every ego-driven move, every attempt to outsmart you brought them exactly where they are, cornered by consequences they designed. And here's the line that stings them most. They never lost to you. They lost to their lack of depth. They weren't strategic. They weren't intentional. They weren't self-aware. You didn't beat them. They never stood a chance. Number 6. Foresight. The burden that turned you into their warning sign. Seeing the future isn't power. It's punishment for a mind that refuses to stay blind. That's the reality they never understood. People romanticize having vision, but they don't see the loneliness that comes with knowing too much, too early. You weren't ahead of them because you were dramatic. You were ahead because you saw the storm forming while they insisted it was just a breeze. Your clarity threatened their comfort, so they mocked it. Mocking was easier than admitting you were right. Imagine standing on a hill, watching a wave build, screaming warnings while everyone else sunbathes and laughs. You weren't trying to control them, you were trying to protect them, but their pride made them deaf. And every choice they made dragged them closer to consequences you predicted with painful accuracy. When everything finally exploded, they didn't apologize. They came running to you for reassurance, forgetting they rejected the very truth that could have saved them. Here's the cruel fact. Foresight doesn't make you feel wise. It makes you feel exhausted. Those sleepless nights, that frustration of being ignored, that ache of watching preventable outcomes unfold in slow motion. Those are the scars they never see. And still you carried the weight, because ignorance might be comfortable for them, but it isn't an option for you. Imagine watching someone play with fire, begging them to stop, only to be blamed for the burn afterward. That's the road you've walked, lonely, heavy, relentless. But the truth stands untouched. Your foresight never failed. And that alone proves your strength wasn't an accident, it was built. Number 7. Their ego was the blindfold. The truth was the knockout. Nothing destroys a person faster than realizing the one they underestimated was right the whole time. That's the punch landing on them right now. They never rejected your truth because it lacked logic. They rejected it because swallowing it meant admitting you saw what they refused to see. Their pride wasn't protection. It was a blindfold they wrapped around their own eyes while calling you the delusional one. Imagine someone refusing to clean their glasses, insisting the world is blurry because everyone else's vision is broken. That's how they operated. They mocked you not from confidence but from fear. The idea that you had more clarity than them felt like an attack on their identity. So they hid behind arrogance like a toddler pulling a blanket over their head, thinking the monster disappears. Here's the raw fact. Ego isn't strength. It's camouflage for insecurity. They built a fortress out of denial, convinced themselves it made them untouchable, and then acted shocked when the truth broke through the walls like a battering ram. Every warning they ignored returned sharper. Every truth they ran from circled back faster. The universe doesn't spare people who reject clarity out of pride, and now they're choking on every consequence they thought they were too smart to face. That bitter realization is melting their ego like acid, leaving nothing but the truth they mocked you for. Meanwhile, you're exactly where you've always been, steady, unfazed, proven right without lifting a finger. Their ego made you the target. But the truth, it made their ego the villain. Let them sit with that. They earned every second of it. Number 8. They never feared you. They feared what you exposed. People don't run from the mirror because it's dangerous. They run because it tells the truth. That's the core of their panic. Their fear was never about your personality, your presence, or your voice. It was what you represented. Exposure. Every time you walked into a room, the illusions they lived inside started shaking. You didn't even have to speak. Your clarity alone made their excuses feel flimsy. Imagine someone patching cracks in a wall with stickers, pretending the structure isn't collapsing. You were the earthquake that exposed how weak that foundation really was. Every truth you carried sent tremors through the lies they decorated their lives with. They clung to those lies the way a child clings to a broken toy, insisting it still works, because the truth would shatter their entire identity. Here's the brutal fact. They didn't fight you to win. They fought you to avoid seeing themselves. Their mockery was armor, Their rejection was escape. Every time they dismissed you, they were really begging the universe to let their illusions survive one more day. But illusions don't last, and the truth has a nasty habit of showing up even when nobody invites it. Now everything they avoided has exploded into the open. Their reality is cracked wide, their confidence is leaking, and the denial they worshipped has turned into rubble around their feet. They're finally seeing what you saw ages ago, and the shock is crushing them. Their fear was never about you. It was about the truth you carried, a truth too loud to suppress forever. And now they have no choice but to face it. Number 9. The crown that crushed them, but made you unbreakable. The truth isn't a gift placed gently in your hands. It's a crown made of blades, and only the strong survive wearing it. That's the part they never understood. They thought you were dramatic, intense, paranoid. They never realized you were carrying a weight sharp enough to cut anyone who touched it. They mocked you from the comfort of ignorance, while you walked around holding revelations that felt like fire under your skin. Imagine standing on a cliff, seeing the storm forming miles away, while everyone else builds sandcastles, laughing like nothing could ever go wrong. That was you. They played, you braced. They slept, you stayed awake. They saw peace. You saw the pressure rising under their illusions. The emotional toll shaped you in ways they'll never understand. The nights you couldn't sleep, the days you pretended everything was fine, the moments you questioned whether knowing the truth was worth the isolation it brought. Here's a brutal fact. Knowing doesn't comfort you. It isolates you. The truth carved itself into your bones, shaping resilience they never had a reason to develop. You became strong because you had no choice. You carried a weight that would have snapped them in half on day one. And now the same truth they joked about is tearing through their lives like a blade slicing through paper. Their illusions are collapsing faster than they can rebuild. They're overwhelmed, humiliated, desperate for explanations that you already lived through years ago. And while they fall apart under the pressure, they look back at you with a single haunting realization. You survived what they're barely enduring now. Imagine handing someone the crown that shaped you, only to watch it crush them the moment it touches their head. That's what's happening. They're finally tasting the weight that forged you, and it's too much for them. Their hands shake, their minds spiral, their pride evaporates. But you remain unbroken, because the truth didn't destroy you. It refined you, it sharpened you, it crowned you. And the very weight that's crushing them is the same weight that molded you into the one they should have listened to. They're only now learning what you've known all along. The crown of truth is heavy, and you're the only one strong enough to wear it. Number 10. The crown they couldn't lift, but you wear without flinching. The chosen aren't loud because of their power. They're quiet because of the weight that comes with it. That's the truth nobody ever tells. Being chosen isn't about applause, spotlight, or getting credit. It's about carrying truths most people won't even touch. It's about walking through storms silently, while others pretend the sky is clear. It's about wearing a crown they thought was symbolic, until it crushed them the moment they tried to lift it. Imagine a path where every step requires clarity, discipline, and vision, while everyone else runs in circles chasing illusions. That path was yours. Not glamorous, not easy, not understood. They mocked your insight because it exposed their denial. They rejected your warnings because accepting them would have shattered the comfort they built from lies. But time stepped in, dragging every hidden truth into the open. And suddenly, the clarity that isolated you is the same clarity haunting them. And here's the twist they don't expect. Your victory doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like relief. You already paid the emotional price, the sleepless nights, the doubt, the pressure, the burden of knowing. Now they're the ones stumbling through the ruins of their own illusions, shocked by a reality you mastered ages ago. Being chosen means carrying sight others aren't built for. It means accepting that some people will never see the full map you navigate by instinct. But you didn't walk this road to be understood. You walked it because the truth demanded someone strong enough to do it. And now that they finally see what you tried to tell them, you don't need to gloat. You don't need revenge. Your existence, your resilience, your accuracy, that's the proof. Let them scramble. Let them face the consequences they created. You're already beyond the storms that broke them. The weight that crushed them is the same weight that shaped you. You don't need their apologies. Their realization is enough. Number 11. The truth that hit them and never let go. Once reality shows its face, no lie can put it back to sleep. That's the nightmare chewing through them right now. They're finally out of the fantasy where mocking you felt safe and ignorance felt comfortable. The truth is standing in front of them, calm, unmovable, and carrying the same steady energy you held from the start. And now they're facing the fear they tried to avoid. You weren't guessing, you were accurate, and they were loud to hide their panic. Imagine someone wiping steam off a mirror, expecting clarity, only to see the mess they've been avoiding for years. That's what your presence did. You didn't force anything. You didn't expose them on purpose. You simply existed with clarity. And that alone lit up every crack in their character they pretended didn't exist. Once a person sees themselves without filters, denial becomes impossible. They can't unsee the truth. They can't run back to comfort. The truth sticks to them like a shadow they never asked for. They always thought your calm meant you didn't know enough. Turns out it meant you knew too much. And their noise. It wasn't bravery, it was fear disguised as volume. Now they're replaying every moment they dismissed you, feeling the sting of each warning they brushed off, realizing every joke they made was really a joke on themselves. While they scramble for explanations, you don't have to do anything. You stand steady because the truth didn't rise. It simply caught up. It's not revenge. It's reality finally walking into the room. Let them sit with the weight of it. Their realization isn't just awareness, it's the consequence they earned. Number 12. The rise they couldn't stop even when they tried. The cruelest karma for doubting someone is being forced to watch them win in silence. And that's the punishment they're living through now. They're watching your rise unfold in real time. Not loud, not dramatic, not chaotic, but smooth, controlled, unstoppable. A rise so quiet it exposes how wrong they were, how blind they were, and how foolish it was to ever underestimate you. They expected you to crumble under pressure. Instead of lowering yourself to hold on, you chose to refine who you are. They believed you would beg for connection, but you rose beyond the space they occupied. They expected you to chase their validation, yet you chose to pursue inner clarity instead. And the universe responded with perfect alignment. Every time you walked away from their chaos, you stepped deeper into your own strength. Now they are left staring at you through the ruins of their own pride, realizing that the one they once dismissed was actually the central force of the entire story. From the very beginning, you were never the background. You were the original blueprint. Like someone trying to hold water in their hands, convinced they could control its flow, that was them. And you were the ocean. Now all they are left with is empty hands, hollow pride, and the truth that they never held the power they claimed over you. Your growth was never born from revenge, but from choosing yourself when no one else could understand your path. It came from quietly walking away instead of fighting noise. It came from becoming the version of yourself they were never ready to face. And the universe honored that courage, rewarding you with alignment. Their collapse is simply the echo of their own misjudgment. This is the final seal on your journey. Their shock confirms your truth. Their regret confirms your proof. And your rise is the ending they never anticipated, yet the one you were always destined to reach. Reality has finally caught up, and now they stand among the remnants of everything they once denied. While you continue to rise untouched, this entire journey proves what they refuse to accept. You were never behind. You were always ahead of your time.